Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
podcast for parents and families everywhere.
Whether you have kids that plan to attend college or you have current college students, you want them in and you want them to graduate.
You want a quality education that will give you a skill set that will make you marketable for the jobs of today and the jobs of tomorrow. I am Mark Stucker, and I'm a college coach from Metro Atlanta.
And I am Anika Madden, and I am a parent also from Atlanta, currently in North Carolina.
And I'm David Williams, and I'm a dad from Chicago, Illinois.
This week in the news, the end of college as we know it. A great article by Frank Bruni in which he laments, is this the end of Shakespeare? Mark and Anika will discuss, is paying for college the student's or the parent's responsibility? Our question this week is, Mark is going to answer how to approach the new Common App question on COVID-19. Our interview is part 4 with Vanessa Didyk, the CEO of Zeemee, the company that lets students share their stories with the college communities. And our college spotlight is the HBCU, Morehouse College in Atlanta.
How many times did you practice that this week so you wouldn't mess up?
About 15. HBCU.
Dave's got a good sense of humor because normally I would have deleted that last week for those who heard last week. But I said, Dave can have it. He can laugh at himself. We can have some humor at his expense. He's a good guy.
Well, we won't quiz our listening audience to who knew that acronym before we said it.
There we go. So, friends, some announcements this week. We've been talking in the past about all the schools going test optional because of COVID-19, whether it was permanently 1 year, 2 or 3 year experiment. And we even encouraged you in the past to go to appleruth.com that has an outstanding blog that's tracking it and updating it daily. But I still want to just mention some of the schools that have gone test optional since we last gave an update. Duke, Notre Dame, Brown, Yale, Harvard, Princeton, Caltech, Butler, Baylor, Carnegie Mellon, or Indiana University, Penn State, Purdue, Rice, UT Austin, William and Mary, to name a few. So dominoes are falling, and they are falling fast. And the big question, and we'll come back and look at this, is who remains test optional, or who, like Sam Prouty of Middlebury says, testing's going to be like the old rotary phone. Nobody's going back there once they drop it. So that'll be interesting for us to look at. Also interesting for me, and I get a laugh out of this, is watching how when one school goes test optional, their competitor goes test optional real fast. Like when Williams went test optional, Amherst announced they were test optional within 12 hours. And Dave, I don't know if you know this, but the last 2 schools to go test optional in the Ivy League, because the whole Ivy League's test optional now for this year, were Princeton and Harvard. And so Harvard went test optional, and then Princeton went test optional a few hours later. That announcement came out so fast. So interesting how when the competitors move in one direction, everybody follows.
Well, it's like the old gas stations that are just across the street. Gas, 99 cents. Oops. Get ours down to 98. You got to keep those customers going. But,
there you go.
To tie into that, Mark, I can't imagine how any schools are going to be able to even conduct the test. As we do this podcast just today, you and I know that the big news is that the COVID-19 positivity rates are spiking. We have the highest surge that we had since the pandemic. It's all among young people. So I'd like to know which testing centers are going to be ready in the fall to be socially distanced and safe, given the surge that we're seeing currently in the pandemic.
Yeah, what really hit me? Because I was watching the news yesterday, and they said the 3 biggest states, the most populated states, which are California and Florida and Texas, all had their record day for their most. Most coronavirus test positive in the same day to show the spike. Having said that, that's a good segue into my next announcement. The ACT is doing something which is unprecedented. Normally, the ACT and the SAT have 7 tests they administer a year. But the ACT is announcing that they will have 7 test dates just in September and October.
Whoa.
So that's how Yeah, that's how they're pushing back. Historic 7 test dates within a 6-week span, including Sunday testing. So there's been Sunday testing in the past exclusively for people for religious holiday purposes, but not open to the public. So September 12th, 13th, 19th, October 10th, 17th, 24th, 25th, all days the ACT is offering now in that same time span. The SAT is only being offered on 2 days in there, September 26th and October 3rd. So it's kind of interesting how aggressive the ACT is getting.
Well, I don't know, Mark. To me, that's a little like finding out that your patients are diabetic and offering free cupcakes for the next week. Still doesn't answer the question, how are you going to accommodate all those test dates without getting those kids positive?
I had another analogy that popped in my mind. I was thinking like, you're trying to get a date for, for the prom. And so you first go for the homecoming queen, and then you go for, the runner up, and then you just line up side up front. Whoever comes off the bus, you ask the first 7 people.
That's right.
Will you go with me? Will you go with me? Will you go with me?
That's right.
Anyway, so we'll see how it works out.
Right.
Okay, friends. I announced last week that I am on Twitter, and what I didn't realize, and I'm so late to the party, how much fun it would be. I'm having a blast on Twitter. So last week I said, look for me to maybe give 1 or 2 tweets a week. I'll let you know the article, share it with you if you want to read it in advance. I'll let you know our up-and-coming interview so you know ahead of time who's going to be interviewed next. But now I'm up to 5 to 7 tweets a week. And so if you want to get my streaming consciousness on college admissions, on major announcements in advance, I'm going to be putting up around 1 tweet a day. And I'm still figuring out what I'm doing, flying by the seat of my pants. But I am loving it. So I encourage you to follow me. My handle is @171answers, or you can just put in Mark Stucker, and I'm having a blast. So come join the party. I think you're going to like it. I'm going to give some real good college admissions information on Twitter.
Okay. But now,
go ahead, Dave.
Be careful.
What are you thinking?
Man, I don't know about that stream of consciousness going straight to a tweet. Let me just say that it ain't working out too well for our current president.
Hey, man, don't even go there. Don't even make that comparison.
Just make sure you have. I think there should always be like a 20-minute delay on any tweet. And you should always.
I think you got burned by him, and you're looking at me through his prism. So I'm not that dude.
I mean, at the very least, make sure you have tweet spell check.
Oh, you're funny. Yeah. All right, our admissions tip. If you have a choice between a letter grade, A through F, or a numeric grade, 90, 80, 70, hopefully 90s and 80s, for your grades versus pass-fail, I strongly encourage you to take the letter or the number grade option, unless your grades are in the toilet. As I am interacting with different admission officers, they are repeatedly telling me to urge my students to take the letter grades or the number grades and not to take the pass-fail if they're given an option. You say, why? Well, schools may be going test optional, but trust me, they have no interest in going grade optional. So you've taken one tool of evaluation away from them with testing. That puts even more importance on grades. And so if you take grades away, if they see you had a choice and you did that, it can have a deleterious impact on their admission decision for you. Next up, admissions vernacular. Dave, the word of the day, imposter syndrome. You want to take a stab at that? Imposter syndrome. This is one of these terms admission offices use.
Okay.
Fair amount.
All right. I think I know this. It's when a kid gets into college and they actually deserve to be there, but they are insecure and figured out they only got in by a fluke. And so then they have this psychological insecurity, like they're an imposter and they don't feel they deserve to be there. And you have to shore up their insecurities. Did I get that one?
Bingo, bingo. Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
All right.
That's good, my friend. Very common with under-resourced kids. Very common with first-gen kids. Very common with students of color who are used to being in a predominantly Black or Native American or Latinx environment, and now they're thrown into an all-white environment, especially if it's wealthy. And there's some other names for it, also known as imposterism. imposter experience, or the fraud syndrome, or imposter phenomena. All those names you'll hear. So I can't use those missions vernaculars anymore because I blew them all out of the water by using them as synonyms. But it is a psychological pattern in which one doubts their accomplishments, a persistent internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. It's feeling like I am not worthy of being here. I feel insecure. I feel inadequate. I don't have all the money these kids have, or I don't know the words they have, and I don't feel like I belong. So you pretty much nailed it. Good job, Dave.
Well, I can tell you that imposter syndrome is not just for underprivileged kids. I think it's rampant. And I had to tell my daughter, stay off College Confidential. Half those kids are lying anyway.
Yeah, so that is why I don't recommend that resource.
Yeah.
Don't even get me started on that. While there are some good articles linked and some things in there, oh, don't even get me started. And admission offices hate that website. There's some 13-year-old telling you how to get into a college, and everybody's embellishing their test scores and acting like, yeah, I got 1,600 in the 8th grade. What are your scores?
That's right.
No, good point, Dave.
When I was in the 4th grade,
under-resourced.
When I was in the 4th grade, I came up with E = MC squared, but they told me to show my work.
Yes. There you go. There you go. There you go. And good point. Good point. It doesn't have to be for the indigent, it can be for a wide range of different people who just don't feel like they belong when they arrive.
Right.
Let's turn to college hot topics in the news. Article time.
Article time. I like this article. And we're going to make this a very interactive article. It's basically by Frank Bruni. We know him very well, the very acclaimed New York Times article. We've referenced a number of his books and articles, including, Mark, what's the one that we always talk about?
Where You'll Go Is Not Who You'll Be.
Absolutely. And that is one of our really recommended resources. I mean, that is a must read for any parent or student beginning this process. But in this article, he talks about the end of college as we know it. I'm just going to start off with a couple quotes, and then I'm going to throw this open up to discussion. So Mr. Bruni does the setup that says that this pandemic is probably the worst thing that's ever happened to colleges. We all know the story of falling revenues, falling admissions, online classes, lawsuits from kids, and that it's also killed 125,000 people. And so he makes this statement at the beginning. He says, we need doctors and we need scientists to deal with this pandemic, but we also need Achilles. We need Homer. We need writers. We need philosophers and historians, because he says, quote, to chart the social, cultural, and political challenges of this pandemic in terms of restoring faith in the American project and reseeding common ground, these things are beyond essential. And his fear is that a devastated economy that guarantees more students will approach higher education in a brutally practical fashion, as he terms it, an on-ramp to employment and nothing else. So, Mark, let me stop here and get your feedback and get the sense of where you want to take this.
Well, I think he's right. So I think let's just set the context. So I've said this before in the podcast, but the global financial crisis, which hit really hard in really, you could say 07 through 09, that whole time frame, colleges have not recovered from that. Colleges are still having a hangover. Millennials have not recovered. Our whole society hasn't recovered. It's what's caused a lot of people to question the value of college, because that was a time when kids were graduating and an inordinate number of them were not finding work. It was also a time that led to colleges cutting back on their financial aid awards because the state appropriations were cut back because there was less money in the budget. So they passed more and more and more of the cost of college onto the families and students. So you have college loans going from 600 to 1.6 trillion. Mm-hmm. And then you also have simultaneously people not getting jobs at the same rate they once got, leading them to question the value of college. But it also led to something else, which is if I'm going to college, I'm going to make money, and making money became almost the singular focus of going to college. And what Bruni argues is that with COVID, that's now just going to be, this is an accelerant.
Yep.
And this is going to be on steroids, the same phenomena. Because the downside, what happened during the same time, is colleges experienced a lack of interest in things like the humanities and the social sciences.
Right.
Some of those departments just dried up and were canceled. Faculty had to be laid off, classes canceled, because parents were saying, I'm not paying all this money if you're not going to get a good job. And I don't see the path for you getting a good job by taking those courses. But what he argues here, and I think he argues it very, very effectively, is that while things like chemistry and computer science are incredibly valuable skills and needed in society, if you are not taking courses that help you to better understand the human condition, then as a society, we're going to struggle, we're going to suffer, because we're a society of people and individuals, and how can we function if we don't understand ourselves? And,
right.
And so here's just one quote, of which there are many, many really good ones in the article. But here's this one. It says, to solve our short-term problems, that emphasis makes sense. But to solve our long-term ones, he says, to apply the lessons of the Spanish flu of 1918 and the urban uprisings of 1968 to the misery and rage of 2020, he says, I want as many broadly educated, deeply reflective citizens as possible. Right. And then, and what he does at the end of the article is he quotes a number of people who he interviewed. These are usually 21-year-olds. And they talk about the value they got from the humanities, from the social sciences. So I'll just read a couple, and then Dave, I'll throw it back to you for some commentary. I'm going to butcher the name here. I'm going to try, though. Marinelli de Hembla, 21-year-old, told me that her double major in political science and Chinese language at Hunter College, which is part of the City University of New York, isn't perfectly tailored to a given profession. But what it has allowed her to see and evaluate is America's predicament through the lens of other people's struggles. It taught her how to watch for the way some people try to profit from others' pain, taken her outside of her narrowest self and given her more sensitivity and warm-heartedness. And then I'll just read one other. Lexi Robinson, 21-year-old, who graduated from Central Michigan. Although her major was public and nonprofit administration, she loved and delved into the humanities. For example, taking a religion and social issues course, she found extremely meaningful. It sounded an alarm about our moral absolutism. Whatever side you're on, you think the other is telling blatant lies, she told. Adding such a viewpoint is a dead end for a democracy. How do we ever come to the middle ground? So I've spoken for a while, Dave. What are your thoughts about anything I said or anything else in the article? Well, let you take it where you want to go.
Well, I'm just going to add to it. I think you're absolutely correct. We throw around the term humanities, and so I want to give a definition out there. Someone once asked me, what is the humanities? And a simple way to think about it is, it's the study of what it is to be human, both on an individual level, what motivates us, our thoughts and fears, and a societal level. What obligations do we have to each other if we are to have a functioning society? And, Bruni goes on to quote this Frank Rosenberg, who was president of Morehouse College, that says, a society without a grounding in ethics and self-reflection and empathy and beauty is one that has lost its way. And he goes on to talk about how Shakespeare and Eliot lavished attention on the conflict between an individual's desires and our communal obligations, and also talked about, quote, the fruits of fear and the dangerous lure of ignorance. And I'm going to throw this back to you, Mark. I mean, can you not see how relevant this is to the last 4 years that we've just experienced under this administration?
Yeah, and I draw off my own personal experience from college. Now, of course, I was a psychology major, but I draw almost daily off things that I learning about things like cognitive dissonance and personal space bubble and sociology, how a group psyche and a group dynamic develops, and the loss of individual consciousness and a group consciousness can cause certain behaviors to happen when people are in groups. I draw off that stuff and many other things all the time.
Yeah.
Here is my favorite quote from the article. It says, science may produce better versions of tear gas and lighter versions of riot gear, God help us, but it can't compete with the humanities for telling us how and why certain societies unravel and others thrive.
Yep.
And so it really is, and it's a collection of these courses. It is foreign languages, it is anthropology, it is psychology and sociology and history and philosophy and English, and being exposed to various types of literature that trains you to learn to see things from a perspective different from yourself, and to understand human beings, how they act, why they act. And if you can never understand to look at things from somebody else's vantage point, you're really going to have difficulty having a unified society and any semblance of a unified society. Let's not even take it to the society. Let's just take it down to the micro level, to understanding that person on your job who's raised completely differently than you.
Absolutely.
To understanding that spouse who had a completely different upbringing than you. It's these type of things. Also teaching you how to think and to be a critical thinker and to be a problem solver. Dave, you've referred to quite a few times to Don Shahar when I interviewed him on a podcast. And Don's an entrepreneur. He started Test Innovators, Seattle-based company. I was talking with him off air. He's a personal friend of mine. And I was talking with him about what he looks for when he hires an employee. He says, what I look for? The ability to think.
Yep.
I want people who can think creatively and critically.
Yeah.
And it's very evident when you make a lot of hires. Some people just are trained how to think and some people can't.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what the problem's going to be 18 months from now. So I need problem solvers.
Right.
And so it's these skills that help you with problem solving and with understanding people. And I agree with Bruni that we are in danger. Corona is an accelerant because it's going to put even more of a focus on, if I spend this money for this education, where's the job? And nothing is wrong with that, but it should also be balanced with not just a complete vocational orientation to education, but also an understanding that one of the major purposes of an education is to better understand human beings, better understand the human condition, and better understand it's not just about a thimble putting knowledge in your head, but it's also about learning how to think.
That's correct.
And this is why this stuff can happen in community, which is one of the reasons why it's a lot harder to get all this, off of online. You can still get portions of it because if you're exposed to different literature and, it can help. But a lot of this stuff happens best if you're also immersed in a very diverse community. So you're like in a learning laboratory to actually apply this with a wide range of different types of people.
I agree. And I would say that the liberal arts and humanities teach you how to think. And as a corollary to that, it also teaches you how to feel other people's pain, how to recognize the commonalities that we all have as being human. You learn that in studying Shakespeare and the plays and the arts. You learn that in history. And one of the things that the Frank Bruni addresses in this article is that have we as a society already lost our way? And he talks about America's empathy deficit. And he says, if we were truly empathetic, would we have had a George Floyd pleading, "I can't breathe," while 4 other officers put the knee on their neck? Would we have had this rise in corona cases because we just cannot get people to feel the obligation to socially distance, not for their own convenience, but for the convenience of others? And, he says that COVID-19 is not only a public health crisis and an economic crisis, but it is also a values crisis. And it's a values crisis that can only be addressed through a liberal arts education.
Yeah. And I was really happy last week when I did the college spotlight I guess it was 2 weeks ago on Rose Holman.
Yeah.
As we know, it's a tech school. But one thing they feel very strongly about is you have 2 full years where you are taking courses in the humanities, in the social sciences, as well as in the visual and performing arts. You're taking those courses because we can graduate someone that has all the technology in the world. But unless they're going to just individually be in a lab all by themselves, for the rest of their life, which is not going to happen, they're going to have to interact with human beings, and they need to be able to understand them. Yeah. And there's been a trend. There's been a growing trend within STEM-based educational environments to add more and more humanities and more social sciences, because they've seen deficits in their graduates that come out with the tech skills but can't understand people. And I can say, I'm not naming names and throwing people under the bus, but one of my somebody who I've known for a really, really long time, this describes him. Like, he got a very strong tech education. He makes a lot of money in IT, but he is clueless at understanding all the things you said: feeling, understanding, seeing things from different perspectives, building relationships with people who are very different from him. He's just so, homogenous in his thinking and inflexible. Mm-hmm. That I look back and I'm like, your education failed you. It failed you because while you mastered the technical side and while you make really good money, you have huge deficits that you just shouldn't have. Well, and also it's a lifelong pursuit. I think we should also say that, Dave, for all of us. I mean, first of all, we haven't arrived. We're all a work in progress in this, and education is a lifelong pursuit. So we're out of school now, but it's incumbent on all of us to be reading and reflecting and learning more and understanding, improving our understanding of others, so that we can all, wherever we are on the scale, wherever we are on the spectrum, we all have room to improve. If a scale is 1 to 10 and we're at a 6, you know what? Let's take our game up to a 9 by doing some of our own education to enhance ourselves.
It's like one of my most favorite movies, Groundhog Day.
I think you brought that up before.
That's right. We all should be realized that we'll be stuck in Punxsutawney until we learn the lessons of making each other better people. I want to read this quote because it's relevant to my profession. He says, quote, "We need doctors, but not all doctors are the same. If you are choosing between 2 physicians, go with the one who has read Chekhov, because he's a fuller human being and he's going to treat you like a fuller human being." And I can remember when I was in college in the pre-med, and I got some great advice, and that was to pursue what I was really interested in, and medicine would follow. So I ended up choosing the Woodrow Wilson School of Public and International Affairs. It was a fantastic program. I was able to complete all my pre-medical prerequisites, but it introduced me to a world of politics and philosophy and humanities that I would have never been able to capture for the rest of my life. And it changed the way I thought about medicine. It was responsible for me going into emergency medicine. It led to me spending some time in West Africa during the famine missions of 1986. And I always tell potential pre-med students, look, from an admissions perspective, you are far more interesting as an English major, an arts major, a politics major, a philosophy major than a biochemistry major, because they don't see that many of those. And it really does make a difference to the type of doctors that are produced.
Yeah, you know what this is making me do, Dave? I've been told there's a book that I really need to read, and I've never read it. I wonder if you've read it. It's by Fareed Zakaria, and it's called In Defense of a Liberal Education. It's supposed to be amazing.
I have not read that yet. Go ahead.
Yeah, we should both read it. We should both read it and talk. And it's based on the premise that the liberal arts is under attack. It's a best-selling New York Times bestseller, and it makes a compelling and cogent case for the value of the liberal arts. I've just been procrastinating reading it. Yeah. And I think it's time after reading this article for let's do this. Let's both read it over the summer and then talk about it.
That's right. That's right. And somewhat related, we talk a lot about how a lot of the liberal arts colleges are getting short shrift by a lot of the tech and pre-meds, but they are amazing colleges for producing very, very strong pre-med undergrads. But the Pomonas and the Williams and the Amhersts and the Colbys and the Bates also, by their individualized approach, are producing some amazing students as well. So just a little pub not to overlook the great liberal arts colleges, even if you think you want to be a research scientist going forward.
Sounds good. Yeah. All right, Dave, let's put a bow on it.
Sounds good.
Now it's time for our step-by-step walkthrough of the college admissions process.
Okay, Anika, did you hear the exciting news about Robert Smith that I think is going to help North Carolina A&T?
No, I didn't.
Do you know who Robert Smith is?
No idea. I remember you messaged me and said, hey, check out my Twitter. Is this what you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah,
I clearly didn't make it to Twitter yet.
Yeah, I'm becoming like a Twitter addict now. I'm loving Twitter. All these years, I've been alert. I joined Twitter in 2011. I basically sent out 10 tweets my whole life. And now I decided I'm going to start tweeting and I'm getting addicted. It's so cool. You put all this educational stuff up and then people respond. Do you remember hearing about how a guy spoke at Morehouse graduation last year? Mm-hmm. And he said
paid everybody debt? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So that's Robert Smith. He's the richest black man in the country.
Oh, okay.
He's worth over $3 billion. He lives in Denver. So Norman, my brother's in Denver. So he's talking to me about him quite a bit. Mm-hmm. So the same Robert Smith just announced that he that he is going to launch a brand new initiative. He's going to raise $500 million for 11 HBCUs.
Oh, wow.
And it's called the New Freedom Initiative. And this initiative is going to go to these 11 HBCUs. They're going to have the money raised by next year. So it's starting in fall of 2021 is when it's going to kick off. Mm-hmm. And he wants to have the $500 million by October of next year. He's already got a $50 million commitment from the Ford Foundation. And knowing him, he gave $50 million to Cornell, which is where he went to school. He's a STEM guy. He's really a STEM guy. He's made his money on biotech and starting a biotech hedge fund. So, there's no way in the world that A&T won't be one of those top schools. Like they're researching the 11 schools. Yeah. And so if you figure that out, if they give the same amount to everybody, then that's going to be about $45 million to each school. And the goal is to help 5,000 students per year with this money. And so, one of the good things that's happening, what's going on in the culture right now, is that a lot of people's consciences are being pricked. I don't know, Reed Hastings, you may have heard from the CEO of Netflix, gave $40 million to Spelman, $40 million to Morehouse, and $40 million to UNCF. So maybe they'll pay you more money. No.
I know that's not happening. But of course.
No, it's going to go to financial aid, which is a good thing, right?
But where my brain went when you said his name, you said A&T. I immediately thought he did the same thing for A&T like he did for Morehouse. Not quite, but okay, we'll take that though.
Well, hey, 45 mils. If he gets 40 for this, there's no way in the world that he won't pick A&T, especially because of the focus on, science and technology you got going on over there.
Wow.
So anyway, shout out to everybody who's doing all this really cool philanthropy right now.
Right.
I just find it very, very, very inspiring. And someday I told you I made $100,000 commitment to the school that my kids go to, $10,000 a year for 10 years. Mm-hmm. But someday I want to really give some big money, but first I got to make it to give it away.
It's coming. Just put 18 on top of the list. Get it.
Look at you. Just spoken from an advancement/development person trying to hit me up for some cash.
Just put us on the list. That's all I ask.
Hey, I thought you were going to say, put my family, my personal family.
Well, I was going to talk about that off the air, Mark.
Hit me up for John's tuition bill.
It's coming. Don't worry.
I'll say this really quickly. So I've been getting all these calls from my students lately. A bunch of my former students, because, they know each other. Mm-hmm. And they've started selling kitchen knives for this company called Cutco.
Yeah. Okay.
And these things are expensive, like $5,000, $7,000 for their top one. So they've been hitting me up like, oh, let me hit up Mr. Stucker and I'll do a presentation. They're trying to make their little side hustle. Mm-hmm. And my kindness only goes so far when the umpteenth student hits me up for their little gig. But anyway, let's dive in today. So we are looking at chapter 127, the book I wrote called 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions. And today we're exploring and answering the question. So today we are answering the question, is paying for college the student's responsibility or the parent's responsibility? Both their responsibility. Anika, you read the chapter. Chime in with your thoughts and ask any questions you have.
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to jump to the quick answer. I want to jump to the two perspectives that you shared, based on the college that you're going to and also the government itself.
Okay.
So you say, which was really interesting because the first point that you made is that depending on the college you apply to, for example, if you're going to one of these schools that require the CSS profile, they actually factor in, student income, like summer earnings or something like that. And so that is an indicator that they are expecting to have the student, for the student to have some skin in the game, basically. Mm-hmm. And then your point about the government is that, okay, the EFC, your expected family contribution, is primarily based on the parent's income. So, okay, parent, that means you have some skin in the game. So I thought we'd start with those. So I thought that was interesting to look at it in that way.
Yeah, let me expand on that. So, and I think there's no way to expand on it without just coming out and saying the answer. I know we were doing it inductively,
right?
But the bottom line is both people are responsible for paying for college. There's just no way around it. And if you need proof of it, let's look at how colleges come up with what they ask you to pay.
To pay our staff,
so
cover our other
your expected family contribution, which is primarily
at the start of every
the
month,
parents' income and assets. It's parent and student income and assets, but how many students have income and assets, right? Most students don't. So that number is what you're expected to pay, and irrespective of scholarships that you get. Now, need-based scholarships. Now, there is such a thing as getting a merit-based scholarship to cancel all of that, like Janaea got. Okay, good for her. Did you read the chapter where I said Mark Kantrowitz has done the research?
And he says,
I did. What is it, 3,000? Something
yes,
like that?
yes. So only 3 out of every 1,000 students gets a full ride. And Janaea was one of the 3. So, so she cannot just say I'm part of the 1%. I'm part of the 0.3%. The 0.3% they got all the college paid for. But that's merit-based money. Off of a need-based analysis, even when you get scholarship money, even if you get outside scholarship money, you are still expected to pay your EFC. Okay? That's kind of etched in stone from a need-based analysis. Now, that is parents. That's parents' money. That's parent assets. So that's proof right there that parents have to contribute. Now, on the student side, there's a couple proofs that the student has to contribute. One is what you mentioned, but I'll get to that in a second. But one is the student loan. The student loan is almost in every single financial aid package. Now, family has money and they don't apply for financial aid. They've got it saved. They can just pay. That's totally different. Okay? We're talking about not having someone who can just stroke a check. We're talking about someone who applies for financial aid. Mm-hmm. Student loan is in that package. That is a student loan. It is not a parent loan. It is a student loan that is automatically in that package for all but about 1% of colleges. So there's proof that the student has to contribute. Furthermore, a lot of students will get a work-study job. Further proof that students have to contribute. And here's the point you were making. Let's say you're one of these schools that says we don't give loans. Though there's like 20 of them that for all incomes, there's no loans. They automatically replace loans with grants. Mm-hmm. Okay. The Davidsons, the Vanderbilts, the Amherst, the Princetons, short list. Even those schools have a summer work component and a school year work component. In other words, if you take a look at Columbia or Brown, which are a couple schools on that list, they still expect students to contribute around $5,000 to $6,000 by summer work or by school year work. So I don't know if I'm getting too much in the weeds here, Nika, or if this is helpful, but I'm just sort of showing the proof. Like if you need any more proof that students and parents have to contribute, all you have to do is look at how schools come up with and determine how much money you're going to have to pay. And when you look at it, you'll see a parent component, EFC. You'll see a student component with a student loan and student work responsibilities in the school year and for certain schools in the summer. The reason why I say certain schools, I don't get too technical, it's only profile schools that have this summer work component in it, not FAFSA schools. But it's also the profile schools. They're the only ones that are doing this no student loan. So what are you thinking over there, Anika? I feel like I kind of got in the weeds. It might have been a little technical, but just so listen. What do you think?
But how about this statement? So a statement that you made in the chapter, you took the thought right out of my head as I was reading it. Mm-hmm. And you say you may be thinking that this is a very middle class perspective to believe that a parent needs to pay something. So I thought about, the scenario that you followed up with where, if a parent has a low EFC, or if a parent, I think you said a parent is making less than $25,000 a year, their EFC is automatically zero. But I'm even thinking beyond the EFC, and I'm thinking about parents who are just struggling, right? And the kids, doing great, going off to college, but they still have a big bill. You got all these Parent Plus loans. The parent's going to do whatever they have to do to make sure this kid has a better life. So at that point, I've qualified to pay the child's schooling, but I can't afford it. So at what point, ethically, is it the child's responsibility to say, you know what, this is really my responsibility. My mom just got me through the door, and from there.
Well, that's a really deep question. And I know that I can understand when you would ask that question because you're that super person that worked full time when you went through college and worked evenings and did everything to make it happen. I find most kids are not at that level. I think that's an extremely mature perspective, what you're asking. But I find that most kids are just not at that level. I find what happens most of the time is that the parent needs to set the parameters. What I find is more likely to happen, and what I recommend is because parents be the one to let the child know this is the absolute maximum amount we can do. This is what we expect you to do. Let's say a family says I can possibly do 10,000, with savings, with loans, whatever, I can do 10,000. That's the most I can possibly do. I usually tell students that you can contribute $10,000 to your education. One, you can handle the federal direct student loan. You can do that. Okay. As I've said, I think on here before, right now, if you took the full $27,000 loan out, that would be 10 years of payments of $263. Okay. You can do that. And you can work and make $2,500, during the school year and another $1,000 over the summer. You can do that. So a student can come with 10, a parent maybe can come with 10 by the time you look at all sources. Remember, part of what a parent has to do is also look at money they're going to be saving by not having their kid at home anymore, assuming a kid is living on the dorm. There's savings there. Right. And that's what I want people to do. Go back and look at all your savings. Let's say you paid for test prep. Let's say you played for some little league or travel sports, and there was some fees there, and there's gas, and there's, even reduced utility bills. So you look at every single thing you're saving by having them out of the house. Maybe you can pick up a few more hours. You come up with the maximum amount you could do, maximum they can do. Then you come to the side and say, this is the most we can do, and we're only going to look for colleges within this budget. That's what I recommend, because the problem is kids just don't have a sense of the value of money. Like I was talking to a student the other day that wanted to go to Clark and has no money, and Clark gave them no money. And I'm like, you can't go to Clark. And by the way, Clark gave all Parent Plus loans to the parent in the package. I'm like, I'm not going to approve of your mom taking up this parent debt, and you don't have any money. So I'm not trying to be insensitive. And she was crying. It was really sad. She's crying because it's the only school she wanted to go to. But she's like, I can take out loans. And, the kids don't have a sense of what it's like. They haven't lived long enough to know what it's like to pay those type of loans back. So I find it's just an extremely mature student that would be able to do what you're asking to do, Nika. And that must have been super Anika when she was 18 or 19, but it's not the average kid.
Yeah. Well,
does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. And also to your point in the chapter where, if the kids don't have any skin in the game, then, how better to appreciate something if you don't have some responsibility as a part of it. So that matters.
I mean, both of my kids, I have them, they both have small amounts of loans. Mm-hmm. And part of it is for them to take on responsibility because there's a lot of research that shows that, the students that have some skin in the game have higher grade point averages and they're more vested, but also they start to build their credit up too.
Right.
They're starting to build their credit score early. So now, each family has to figure out how much that is. Is that 3,000? Is that 5,000? Is it 10? You know what I mean? It's up to each family. Not every family believes in that, but I believe in that.
Right.
So, but the bottom line is, it's a joint thing between the student and the parent. You need to talk that out in advance. So few families talk about this in advance. When they start talking about it, they apply for financial aid. And the problem is they apply for financial aid not realizing how big of a portion of their discretionary money the school is going to expect them to pay, or the school is going to gap them, meaning that they'll ask them to pay even more than the financial aid formula says they can afford to pay for. So then when they get the aid awards, they're freaking out, and then they start having this conversation. So people do it all backwards. But the bottom line is student and parent both need to do it. Talk about it in advance. Figure out the numbers. You know how they say students respond to boundaries? Mm-hmm. Most students, now I can think of some that are an exception.
Right.
Some I'm working with. But most students, when you give them boundaries, they'll respect those boundaries and conform. And by the way, for the students that don't, that say, no, I think you're being cheap. You're only going to pay so-and-so as a parent. I encourage parents, don't give in to that and don't have a sense of false guilt. They'll be okay. There's, I tell students, if you think there's only one school in the world that can make you happy, that says more about you than it says about the school. That's really a reflection on you. Because there's an aspect of college where you have to make your own happiness. Right. You have to make your own happiness. You determine a lot of pick peers that you like, pick classes that you like, pick clubs that you like, do your research on professors and find professors that you like. There's this idyllic notion out there, just kind of like the whole Cinderella thing, that I'll just find this perfect college and I'll have this perfect 4 years of my life. And if I don't go to this perfect college, then my life is going to be misery and drudgery. That mindset is out there, and I'm trying to debunk it.
All right. Well, the only thing I would do is maybe the title of this chapter, Mark, could be the responsibility of the parents to have a conversation. Like, somebody's got to make sure that conversation is held, like, and to your point, way in advance, and when things start revving up.
Yeah, I mean, I hit that in other chapters in the book, but probably not a bad idea. That's not a bad idea. If I ever do version 2, just the thought of that is giving me a migraine, though.
It's not gonna be season 2.
This puppy was
your college bound. This
puppy. No, your college bound kid energizes me. Writing the book, while it was a passion and a labor of love, and I was all into it, was up till 4 a.m. and I was just all into it. I went into Mark mode, total tunnel vision. Once I got it over, once it was done, I was one of those things where I said, I loved it. I'm glad I did it. I'm not writing another book in my life, It was too much work. Now, lately, I've been getting a little bit of an itch, but I can assure you it will not be a 691-page one if I ever do it. It'll be a little 50-page ebook or something.
A little 25-pager. Oh, we'll take it. We'll take whatever you got, Mark.
Thank you for your kind words. It's time for a question from one of our listeners.
All right, Mark. This week's question is from Kim. And Kim is a college counselor in Raleigh, North Carolina. And she
one of my favorite places.
Raleigh is awesome. How should students answer the new question on the Common App about COVID-19? What is that question? Pause right there.
Yeah, so this is actually a really important question. So on May 12th of this year, the Common App announced they were going to have a new question on the application. And in actuality, there's kind of two new questions. I'm going to talk about both of them. There's a new question for the student, and there's a new question for the counselor. You know, the counselors, remember, there's something that counselors complete. Every counselor has to complete what's known as a secondary school report that provides a lot of information about the students in the school. Mm-hmm. And so I want to cover both of them because they're kind of both related. Like, it's important that students going into whatever they choose to write about this question, it's important, in my opinion, for them to know what the counselor may have said when the counselor did the counselor portion. Mm-hmm. And I know you may be thinking, wait a minute, I thought we're not allowed to see what counselors say. Well, what counselors are going to do, they're not going to do a customized question for every single student. They're going to do a general statement that they're going to upload for all the students in the whole school. So it's not going to be something that's something that's in most instances it will be considered confidential. It's something that a college counselor in most instances would be willing to share with the students so they can see, this is what I will be reporting to colleges about how COVID-19 impacted our school.
Okay.
So there's the school portion from the counselor, which is up to 500 words. And then there's a 250 word response from the student. So let's start first with the student, and then or should I start first with the counselor? Which one do you want me to start with?
Let's do the counselor first.
Okay. So for the counselor, and it's really smart because colleges want to know, like, what changes were made in your school as a result of COVID-19. That will enable us to read your transcript and make, and put it in proper context. So here's how the question reads. Your school may have made adjustments due to community disruptions, such as COVID-19 or natural disasters. So they're also hitting all those fires in California in the same question here.
Right.
You know, if you have not already addressed those changes in your uploaded school profile or elsewhere, you can elaborate here. And then it says, colleges are especially interested in understanding changes too. And then it lists 7 things. And those 7 things are grading scales and policies. Okay, so an example of that would be things like if you decided to go pass fail for the spring, mm-hmm. or if you decided to give the student the option on a course by course basis, whether they go pass fail or they get a grade. Okay, college is going to know that because that's where this would be indicated in those 500 words. Second thing, graduation requirements. Were there any changes in graduation requirements? You know, let's say normally you had some kind of capstone project that you had to do, and now they decided not to do that. Instructional methods. So this is where you would talk about how we shifted to remote learning on such and such a date. Schedules and course offerings. So here, you talk about maybe a course was going to be offered. Maybe you were on a quarter system and you were going to have a course in the last quarter. You completely canceled it and it was a change. And so the school's used to looking for a course offered, every year by the school. And now you explain that we didn't offer this course. And you can talk about schedule changes in there. The 5th thing, testing requirements, what testing requirements you have that you may have altered. The 6th thing, your academic calendar. And then the 7th thing is other extenuating circumstances. So what I encourage students to do is to ask your counselor if they can get a copy of what is being uploaded with that. And sometimes schools will upload documents they've written. Sometimes there's different ways they will approach it. But that's just really important. And can you understand, Anika, why I say as a student, you should know what the school is already saying about that?
Well, of course, that was going to be my next question, because how do you relate? I mean, I'm assuming you want to relate it somewhat to your answer, because I'm assuming that this one question is being asked about COVID.
Yeah, to the student, there's one, and to the counselor, there's one. So it's not so much that you want to relate. It's more that you don't want to be redundant. So you only get 250 words in the student section. Okay. So you don't need to go on and talk about how, there was a change in the AP offerings or blah, 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 whatever the school has already said about the changes. You don't need to talk about how they went to pass fail. You need to talk about all those things because it's already said. So it's redundant, superfluous information. So that's the biggest thing, is knowing what's been said will allow you to know what not to be said, because colleges don't want to waste their time reading something twice. Does that make sense?
That perfect sense. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was actually glad that you said, let's start with the school version.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's talk about the 250 word question for students. Now there's a couple things to know about this. And the one thing I want to start with is this. One thing I love about the Common App, it's a membership organization and do a really good job constantly talking to their partner organizations to get the pulse of them and to get feedback. And so included in there are college admission officers as well as school counselors and CBO counselors. So they're getting feedback from multiple sources and they test these things. So, they don't just sort of fly by the seat of their pants. Even that Jenny Rickard, who's the head of the Common App, has a wealth of admissions experience at multiple different organizations. So they have a pro who's heading the organization, who's close to the admission side, but they're still constantly surveying students and surveying schools and surveying admission officers. So questions like this were beta tested and they got a lot of feedback on them. So let's talk about why they even are having this question. What do you think? Why do you think they would have a question? Why would they add an additional question?
I mean, this is pretty darn unprecedented, what has happened. So, I mean, it's the impact on the school, the in and of the school alone, like to your point about the courses changing and the way you had to go home and work by yourself and all kinds of stuff. So it's such a monumental shift. I would imagine that they would want to address it or at least acknowledge it, in terms of how the students were feeling or dealing with it.
So it's all of that plus other things. So there's multiple reasons. One reason is what you said. This is something that's substantial, monumental shift. Colleges are interested in that, right? So that's part of it. The other reason, though, is they don't want every single personal statement to be about COVID-19. Colleges still want to learn other information about students through that personal statement.
Okay.
Now, one thing I like about the Common App is when they do something new like this, they generally will tell you a lot of information right on their website. So here's some things I'm going to read to you right off of their website. So first of all, another reason why they're interested in doing it is they want to acknowledge. They say, we want to reduce the anxiety for applicants who have been affected by these events and provide them with a way for them to share. So they know people are going to want to talk about this because it's on their mind. But they don't want every single personal statement to talk about it. So I'm going to read exactly what they say. This is off their website. Next year on the 2021 app, Common App will provide students who need it, I'll come back to that, who need it, with a dedicated space to elaborate on the impact, I'm going to come back to that word impact, of the pandemic, both personally and academically. Then it says, this is important, we want to provide colleges with the information they need with the goal of having students answer COVID-19 questions. Listen to this, only once. We want to have students answer COVID-19 questions only once. Now look at this. While using the rest of the application as they would have before to share their interests and perspectives beyond COVID-19.
Okay.
So what does that tell you? What does that tell you what I just read?
Don't get to talking about that in your personal statement.
Correct.
Don't do it.
Correct. So it's a brilliant idea because they're saying, listen, we know this impacted you and we know that you not only want to share about it, you should share about it. So we're going to provide a designated space for you to share about it. However, colleges still want to learn other things. Let's say you're, passionate about robotics. And you've been that way since you've been 12. Well, we want you to talk about that too. We don't want this to supplant that. So that's one of the things that's important as a tip is heed their advice. And if you're going to talk about it, use this space. Don't use your personal statement. Now, let's talk a little bit more about this space. So you know how you have 650 words in the additional information section, Anika, to talk about whatever you want at the end if there's something that's not covered? That is where they intentionally guide you to talk about it. But the good news is they didn't say, okay, guess what? This is 250 words. Now you have 400 words of additional space. They're doing it in addition to the 650. So they're basically creating 900 words of additional space information now. 250 words here if you choose to use it. And then the 650, if you were going to talk about other things, which, we've talked about that before in other podcasts, and let's not get off on a tangent on that and all the different things you can use to talk about times when it's right and wrong to use the additional space. You know what? That would be a really good interview with one of my college admissions people. I'm always looking for topics for them. I'd like to have someone come on and talk about the additional space section, what they like to see in there, what they don't like to see in there. Don't you think that'd be a good interview?
That would be an excellent interview.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. Mm-hmm. So, sorry about that, but I have that up. What happens is so many of the college admissions folks, the best time to do interviews with them over the summer. So I'm hitting them up all now.
All right.
And so it's on my mind a lot. So let's go back to the question. So several things that I said. So one of the things I said was, it says, if you need to. So what does that mean? Does that mean everybody should?
Is this a trick question?
No, I'm just asking you. What do you think?
I don't know. I'm going to say no, but.
Yeah, no. They mean what they say. So first thing is, don't feel like you have to say something. Okay? Don't feel like you have to say something. That's the first thing. Second thing is, and I said I would come back to this. It says on the impact of the pandemic, personally and academically. One of the mistakes that people make is they spend so much time in description talking about what happened to them that they don't spend enough time in reflection. And just in general, that is one of the biggest mistakes I see with all writing, personal statement writing as well. So it's so important that I'm going to say it again. So many people in their writing, they spend so much time on description, describing the events, and they don't spend enough time reflecting on how those events impacted their lives. They're basically begging you here to talk about how whatever you're about to describe, how it impacted you. So if you are going to do it, make sure you spend plenty of time with the reflection and the impact piece. Now, once again, they make it pretty easy. So they even give some pointers in their little FAQ section there where they guide you as to the kinds of things you may want to talk about. And they highlight 3 different ones. One category, illness and loss. Second category, housing and employment disruptions. Third category, shifting family obligations. So they give you some guidance. Now, this is something I haven't said on the podcast before because I try to keep it pretty upbeat. And I felt if I came on this one and shared this on the podcast, it would just create this glum kind of dour mood for the next 5 or 10 minutes. But Anika, you know this, and Dave knows this, but Anitra, my wife, her oldest brother died because of COVID-19. So she's one of 6 kids in the family, and he's the first one to die. He was 60 years old. He's the oldest. And so if Joy or Karis were going through this process, I mean, that would be something a college would want to know, I lost my oldest uncle. Okay. But they wouldn't want it. But that's still in description. That's still description. I lost my oldest uncle. You move to impact when you translate to how that impacted you. So that's the first thing. Now, I don't want to imply that you only should talk about this if something feels like it's incredibly dramatic. There could be little things that impacted you in a major way. So it's very subjective whether or not you talk about it. It's not like unless you had something that was very chronic or acute or raised really high on the Richter scale of what anybody else would seem as important, then don't write about it. If it's important to you, then it's important. I just want to stop for a second and you can see what you're thinking because I've been talking a lot.
No, you haven't. But I do wonder if, impact doesn't always mean something bad, right? Like it could be.
Yeah, glad you said that.
And I think about people professionally, and I just finished a conference last week, and they were talking about how people just got into professional development mode. Like it was like, man, let me just learn all I can because I'm not, some folks are getting furloughed, all things are happening. So in the case of a kid, maybe they were inspired by something, or they were, maybe they got into that professional development mode. That still happens for kids, I guess. But I don't know. I just want to take it to a positive light. Like there could have been something positive that happened or some light that went on for you. Your family may have gotten closer or you learned how to cook something or I don't know.
I think that is extremely important that you said it. And it's so important that when you were saying the whole time, I was thinking, why didn't I think of that? No, because it's really, really, really an important point.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking of even some of my specific students I'm working with now. Like one of the students I'm working with in the greater Boston area, at first, it was kind of upsetting because all the plans that she had, and she's looking at BSMD programs, but all the things that she had planned looked like they were all going to be canceled,
Mm-hmm.
But then she had it within herself. She found the resolve within herself to start applying to all kinds of new things that she wouldn't have even dreamed of applying before.
Mm-hmm.
And she ended up getting this incredible opportunity. That's like an incredibility of a lifetime.
Wow.
And so she could talk about finding this extra gear that I had in me that I didn't even know I had in me when I was forced to have to be really creative to figure out what I was going to do this summer.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a really important point. Don't see the word impact always just in a negative sense. So, any other questions about this question? Or you think we questioned it out?
No, but it's good to know that it's there. I didn't know that, number one. I think you hit the nail on the head.
Guess what? This is my last day in Orlando.
Oh, yeah.
And I am about to, when I go to these resorts, I always do these timeshare presentations, always.
Mm-hmm.
So they got me like a nice, but I say no to everything. So, they gave me like a nice little $150 restaurant coupon that I can use at either Bahama Breeze, Olive Garden, or Longhorn Steak. Mm-hmm. And I'm about to go get me a good last supper before I head out tomorrow morning and go back.
Look at you. Eat on. Mm-hmm. Eat on.
What should I do? Should I go for the shrimp tacos at Bahama Breeze? Or should I go for the Italian at Olive Garden? Or should I go for the sirloin at I'm just getting hungry talking about this. Let me get off so I can go eat.
But don't do Olive Garden. I hate Olive Garden. I haven't had Bahama Breeze in so long. Ooh, get Bahama Breeze. Do it.
Okay. Awesome. Talk to you soon.
See ya.
Okay, friends, it is our final part of my interview with Vanessa Didyk, the CEO of Zeemee. And hopefully you have checked out Zeemee's website. Students, hopefully you've taken out a Zeemee account. But in this final part, Vanessa talks about how Zeemee gets their money. How are they funded? I also asked Vanessa if Zeemee has any services for grad school students or professional students, or are they strictly undergrad? Vanessa walks us through the sign-up process with more detail than she did in the earlier part of our interview. If you're not sure how to sign up for a Zeemee account. And of course, I put Vanessa on the hot seat. Vanessa also shares her email and encourages you to reach out directly to her if you have questions about Zeemee. Listen and enjoy.
And now, this week's interview with a special guest.
I know it's really hard to take the crystal ball and project out into the future, but I'm going to ask you to try. 5 years from now, how do you see Zeemee being different than it is today?
So Zeemee's secret sauce is creating micro communities for students and then sort of injecting into those micro communities whatever resources students need to support them at that time. So we're going to continue to do that. If it's anywhere on that academic journey, we will be able to support students. So I see us over time supporting K-12 students as well. Right now, we're very focused on higher ed admissions. We are building more features for students who are currently on college campuses. So we are launching career fairs for career centers right now and starting to support those offices and starting to work with student success offices to help. We've got features in the app, we release every 2 weeks. So we've got features in the app for students to connect with other classmates currently on campus and find a study buddy, to provide tutoring for one another. So we've got all sorts of ways that once you have these micro communities, and there could be an alumni community, once you have these students kind of connecting around topics of interest, we can then help make sure that we're bringing in the right resources to support them. And that's kind of our big vision and our long-term roadmap is to continue to do that. So to continue to support those students on campus, to get even earlier and start to support some of those K-12 institutions that could use some of what we're doing as well.
And is your funding all through the college partners who pay you a fee because you're bringing value to them? And, or is there also, fundraising component as well to your?
It is. So so we generate revenue through partnerships with colleges. And exactly that. I mean, they are happy to pay to provide a safe space for their incoming students to connect with one another. And so that's one way that we generate revenue. And then we also are a startup. So we raise money over the years, we've raised money to kind of help support what we're doing.
Are you also in the grad school, law school, professional school space, or just undergrad right now?
Great question. So we hope to be soon. We have to make some tweaks to the product. The needs of these entering grad students are a little bit different, and so
right.
we're tweaking our product a little bit, our product experience a little bit for those populations. But we hope to be supporting them, by the end of this year.
So we're almost winding down, but I just want to once again be crystal clear on sort of the sign-up process. I'm really glad you said it's free. Mm-hmm. So people would just go to like Zeemee.com, right? What username, password, and then follow your guidelines for creating their own profile, or select certain schools that you're interested in. I mean, talk to me, fill in the details a little more than that.
We guide you through the whole thing. So you go to find us in the App Store. You can go to Zeemee.com for the links to take you straight to the appropriate, App Store or Google Play Store. And then we kind of prompt students through the whole thing. They use their phone number as a unique identifier. It helps to kind of keep the community pure. We know that you're you. And so you use your phone number to create an account, name, and first name, last name, then grad year. And then at the end of that sign up process, we prompt students to select a few schools that they want to start following. Once they land in the app, they can choose some of our other communities that they want to follow as well. And then it kind of all just makes sense from there. There's more information on our website, of course, for how to get started, but it couldn't be easier because it's an app. We kind of guide you through it.
Love it. Love it.
And we're always available. We've got an active support kind of service. So you can always write in and get help from anybody at any time.
What's the size of the whole Zeemee team right now?
We're 25 employees.
Oh, you've grown.
We have. Yeah. It's we've got a lot of engineers, which is how we're able to maintain this app and build it and update it regularly. We built out a little bit larger product team so that we can actually do more of those interviews with current users and our college partners. So we kind of leaned in those directions a little bit. And then we've got, a really wonderful customer success team that helps to support students in colleges. It's a wonderful team of people I absolutely adore. I'm lucky.
And is everybody in the Bay Area, or like people working from homes remotely around the country? I mean, what's the setup?
Well, everybody is remote right now because of this current shelter-in-place world. About half of our company is in the Bay Area and normally in our headquarters in our office, and the other half is actually remote all over the country. Our Adam, our co-founder, is up in Wyoming. We've got people in Virginia, Texas, kind of all over, Kentucky.
Nice. Well, I warned you, Vanessa. I told you I was going to put you on the hot seat and take you through the lightning round. And I told you I wasn't telling you in advance what I was going to ask you.
Alrighty. I forgot about this part. Let's do it.
Yeah, it's time. So first question, if you were not the CEO of Zeemee, you had to have a completely different career, what would you do?
I would be a race car driver.
Whoa, that's different enough. Where's the fascination from that come from?
I don't know. And if you saw me drive on the regular roads with, my 2.5-year-old and my 7-month-old, I drive like a grandma. But okay. I don't know. That's my fantasy. My fantasy is to be in like a Formula One car, fast as lightning. Yeah, that's what I
wasn't expecting that. That's definitely qualified as being different career. Secondly, how do you relax and unwind? How do you de-stress?
Oh, my kids. We do a lot of hiking and a lot of outside time, and I get so much joy from my kids. So I unplug as soon as my day is done, which can sometimes be later than I'd like. I completely unplug and they just suck all that stress out. They're just the best.
Yeah, I think it's, people that don't have kids, they can't understand just the ineffable amount of joy that they provide. And you can't tell by being around somebody else's kid what it would be like to have your own kids. And
isn't that
one of my good friends in the Phoenix area, for years, I don't want kids. Why do you want kids? Rugrats running around, finally decides that, he had his first kid at 48.
Oh, wow.
Of course, men can do that easier than women.
Yes,
but
yeah.
and now, of course, his daughter's 5, and of course, they're inseparable, and you can't even imagine. And so,
right.
Yeah, I totally get that.
Right. It just unlocks a part of your heart you didn't even know was there. Just gets bigger and bigger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's take a break to learn about Mark's recommended resource for the week.
Jeffrey Selingo is an award-winning journalist who has reported on higher education for more than 2 decades. His writings appear in the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Atlantic, the Chronicle, and the Wall Street Journal. The recommended resource for episode 127 is a relatively new book by Selingo entitled Who Gets In and Why? And the subtitle is A Year Inside College Admissions. About 2 years ago on our podcast, I shared Jock Steinberg's book, The Gatekeepers, as a recommended resource for you, and I got really good response and emails from our listeners to that. In that book, Steinberg was allowed to sit in the admission process at Wesleyan University. That book is a great book, but it is now 17 years old. This is really an updated version of Steinberg's book. Selingo was allowed to sit in and observe the admission process of 3 selective schools over the course of 1 year. Jeffrey Selingo sat and observed the process of 3 very different schools: private college, public university, and a liberal arts and science college. In this book, Jeffrey Selingo writes about some of the factors that influence the admission process that few people who haven't been an actual admission officer understand themselves. This is a book that I recommend wholeheartedly and without reservation, especially if you want to learn what happens in the room where decisions are made. And especially if you want to learn how many factors other than grades and test scores can influence admissions decisions. This is a great book if you want to learn about institutional priorities. We will now return to the final part of my interview with Vanessa Didyk, the CEO of Zeemee. What is that guilty pleasure food you probably shouldn't eat, but at times you just can't resist it?
Oh, Girl Scout Thin Mints. I love those things. And luckily my niece is a little Girl Scout, and so she keeps
so you get them.
Yeah, she keeps me stocked.
You're good then. What's the best book you've read in the last 5 years?
Oh my goodness. I was kind of late to the game on Malcolm Gladwell's Is It Outliers? I was so late on that one and like ate that book up. I loved it so much.
Yeah, he's provocative and make you think. It's a good book.
I read a lot of nonfiction though, and a lot of books about business, and so a lot of things that are probably boring.
I'm a nonfiction reader too.
To other people,
Totally. Are you an audiobook person, or are you a paperback, or are you a Kindle?
So I'm kind of all of the above. My dream scenario is to have a book in all formats. So anytime, I'm in the car, I like to listen to particularly people's biographies, and I like to listen to a lot of politicians' biographies. So that's really great for the car. If I'm going to be reading like some nonfiction, I feel like I need to have it in my hand. I don't really like to listen to, or some fiction. I like to have it kind of in hand. So I'm kind of everything. My dream is to have the same book that I can lay in bed and, read, hold it in my hand, but then also turn it on when I get in the car.
It's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
And expensive.
Yes, true.
Yeah. All
right, here's my last question. What's your best advice for students and your best advice for parents?
I think my best advice for students is to trust the process and and believe in themselves. Like, this is such a special time. And I used to tell my students this, 15 years ago, like, this is their first big moment of saying who I am, here's who I am world. And that there's something so magnificent about that and about that moment, and to be as authentic as you can about who you are and trust that you'll land in the right place as a result, instead of trying to mold oneself into some ideal that they think an ideal school wants them to be. Then they sort of lose what's so special about this process. Like, this is an opportunity to look back, say, here's everything I've done. Here's who I am. Here's what I stand for today. And here's where I see I'm going. And who wants it? Who's interested in me? Like, who does that resonate with? And I think that's really special. And I think for parents, I would say, let that happen. Let that process happen. I think the most stressful application processes that I've seen are when parents are too anxious about it being the right fit, or the right place, not the right fit, the right place. And that pressure kind of bleeds out and suffocates the process for their children. And this is really a time for parents to celebrate who their kids are, all that they've done, and just help be that kind of, hold their hand through this as they figure out the next step in their journey.
Right. Great. So you went to UC Berkeley. Do they use Zeemee?
They do. Yes, sure do. Very proud moment for me when I signed my alma mater, and I just, like, I am obsessed with the videos that they create because it brings me back to my life, on campus in the sort of early 2000s, a long time ago. So yeah, they are. I love it.
Well, Femi Agdalini's, he's their dean of enrollment or VP or whatever the title he has now, but he's
like a vice chancellor.
Promised to come on our podcast as a guest later on. So
he is
he's someone I've known at multiple stints along his admissions career. He was at U Delaware, and he was at Cornell for a long time, and then of course he came out to Stanford, and now he's at UC Berkeley doing a knock-up job. So excited.
He is amazing. He is a superhero. There's not that many people who are just spectacular people, and he is one.
Yeah, he'll be a great podcast guest because he's just, he's got a bluntness and an insightfulness all wrapped up into one that makes for good interviews. So I'm excited about that.
And he's accessible, right? Like, he communicates in a way that people can hear and understand. Love that.
Yes. So listen, Vanessa, this has been fantastic. And it just dawned on me, you know how Zeemee's spelled. I know how Zeemee's spelled, but for someone driving the car, walking the dog, we have a lot of, so many podcast listeners have emailed and said, I used to listen to your podcast on my commute. Because, our podcast is 2 hours. And so they say, so now I'm using it while I jog. and 3 different people said, you're good for my fitness because you have a longer podcast, so I take a longer route.
That's so great.
But they may not know how Zeemee's spelled. So sell Zeemee so people know how to find the website. And I don't know if there's any other social media that you think people should look up, but just take a second to direct people where they should go.
So it's like Zeemee, but for Gen Z. So it is Zeemee. And you could go to our website at zeemee.com and get a lot more information. And if anybody has any questions, my email is vanessa@zeemee.com. And I love talking to everybody. So, if you're a parent, a student, high school counselor, admissions counselor, my best days are spent connecting with people and not sitting behind a computer.
Are you like a Twitter person or any of that stuff? Social media? Do you do any of that stuff or not?
I am, but I'm not as good at all of that. We have some really amazing people who manage. So Harrison Campbell, a lot of admissions folks kind of know who he is. He manages all of our social and does a really phenomenal job. So we are on Twitter, we are on LinkedIn, we're everywhere you want to be. We're on Snap, we're everywhere, and that is all due to him. I can't take any credit for it at all. I just clap my hands and jump for joy that he's on our team.
Well, listen, I just wanted to personally thank you on behalf of all our listeners. On behalf of my 2 co-hosts, Dr. David Williams and Anika Madden. Thank you for coming on today. This has been absolutely incredible. Glad we didn't do it last April because of all the changes and how far you've come in just 1 year. and really excited about this. And let's stay in touch and tell Adam I said hi.
I will. And thank you so much. It's always so fun to talk to you. So thank you.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Next week in the news, another blockbuster out of California. The UC Regents declare their support for an end to race-blind admissions. Mark and Anika will discuss, how do I stand out from the competition and win private scholarships? Our question from a listener comes from Allison, who asks, if all my meaningful extracurriculars started at the beginning of junior year, is that a huge disadvantage? Our interview is with Gil Villanueva, the Dean of Admissions at the University of Richmond, and his interview is advice for under-resourced students when applying and enrolling in college. And our college spotlight is the Jayhawks, the University of Kansas.
Good job. Good job. I'm already excited about next week. But for now, we are talking about what they refer to in Atlanta as the house. The house, which is, of course, the Morehouse College. Yeah. And Morehouse is the first HBCU we have featured, and we've had over 40 college spotlights. So before I dive in, here's a little background on HBCUs. HBCU stands for Historically Black College and University. The term was first officially adopted in 1965 as part of the Higher Educational Act, which expanded their federal funding. So about 55 years ago. However, the history of HBCUs predates the Civil War, a time when Black students were not welcome at predominantly white universities because of segregation. This will probably surprise you, Dave. Guess where the first HBCUs were started?
Well, just because it's counterintuitive, I would say they were started in the North.
Good job. Ohio and Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
In fact, when I was at Westtown, I could literally walk right to one of them, Cheney University. And another one, Lincoln, was about 40 minutes away. So interesting little tidbit there. Especially because HBCUs really dominate the South. That's really what they're known for. So following the end of the Civil War and the abolition of slavery, HBCUs were founded throughout the South with support by the Freedmen's Bureau. And the Freedmen's Bureau was this federal organization that operated during Reconstruction for the purpose of helping slaves adjust to their freedom. This was really kind of the heyday for HBCUs. This is where Atlanta University was founded in 1865, which is now Clark Atlanta University. And that's one of the big three schools we'll be talking about, part of the Atlanta University Center, best known as the AUC. Howard University and Morehouse, founded 2 years later in 1867. Now, legal residential segregation in higher ed does not exist now, but a lot of times people find it beneficial to go to a school that had them in mind, that was designed with them in mind, that understands them. There are very, very empowering benefits that come to that experience in the same way women's colleges can be empowering experiences because they were designed with women in mind. They understand how women think. And there's a lot of parallels between the value of women's colleges and the value of HBCUs. Now, specifically for Morehouse legacy, Morehouse was founded in 1867 in the basement of Springfield Baptist Church in Augusta, Georgia, by the Reverend William Jefferson White, with the encouragement of former slaves. Now, it started out as Augusta Institute. The institution was created for the purpose of educating Black men for careers in ministry and teaching. And its most famous alumni was a minister and teacher. Who would its most famous alumni be, Dave?
Are we talking about Martin Luther King?
We're talking Martin Luther King, absolutely.
Martin Luther King.
The school then moved to Atlanta's Friendship Baptist Church in 1879, changed its name to Atlanta Baptist Seminary. So you can see the strong history roots with both ministry and teaching. The seminary was then moved to downtown Atlanta, and in 1885 to a former Civil War battleground in the site of Atlanta's West End, which is where it exists today, which is about 1 mile from my office at KIPP. By 1897, the institution had become Atlanta Baptist College, and during the tenure of the college's first African-American president, previously, it had been Caucasian presidents for the first, really 50 years, but the first African-American president was John Hope. And the college was renamed Morehouse College in 1913 in honor of Henry Morehouse, who was the corresponding secretary of the National Baptist Home Missionary Society. Beginning in the 1940s, the college's international reputation in scholarship, leadership, and service began to flourish, particularly then as Dr. Mays, Benjamin E. Mays, became the president. The Morehouse School of Medicine was founded in 1975. This is its own school, separate from Morehouse College, but obviously a close relationship exists between both of them. Now, the last 2 years, I've attended counselor programs at Morehouse. One was a half-day program. One was like a 8 to 2:30 kind of program. And I will tell you, I've never visited a college in my life that has more pride about their excellence and more pride about their place in the higher ed landscape. They really do believe that no other school can match what they do. Some people call it arrogance. Some people call it excellence. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. There is a joke about Morehouse men. You can always tell a Morehouse man, you just can't tell him very much. That's the joke at Spelman. But there's a tremendous amount of pride, and we're going to talk more about the Morehouse man in a second. And that is the term. You'll see a Morehouse man, a Morehouse man. That's the term you'll especially hear the alumni use. And anytime I work with somebody who graduated from the house, I can all but assure they are going to want their kid to go there. So oftentimes I have to challenge them and say, is this your decision or your kid's decision? I have no problem at all if your kid wants to go there. I just want you to let them make their own decision. But it's certainly a compliment to Morehouse that the alum felt so profoundly impacted by that institution that they want their child to have the same experience. Now, the National Science Foundation also ranked Morehouse as the #1 producer of Black men who received doctorates in education, life and physical science, math and computer sciences, psychology and social science, as well as humanity in the arts. I mentioned its most famous alum, Martin Luther King, but there are many famous alum who have gone to Morehouse. Do you know any others, Dave?
Off the top of my head, I know some friends, but no.
That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
So you'll know some of these names for sure.
Yeah.
Samuel Jackson.
Oh, yeah. Samuel, of course. Yeah.
So, yep. The head of African American Studies at Princeton, always on MSNBC all the time.
Wait, Eddie Glad. Eddie Glad Jr. I did know that. I knew Eddie Glad went to Morehouse.
Yeah, I knew you know some of these. That's all right. And then I'm gonna use the name that Morehouse used when they refer to him, Sheldon Spike Lee. So after he left,
that's right.
After he left Morehouse, he just became Spike Lee, but they still call him by his name. He was known when he was at the house, Sheldon. So he's Sheldon Spike Lee to them. Lerone Bennett Jr., famous historian.
Yep.
First Black mayor ever in the South, Maynard Jackson.
Yep.
Founder of BET, Robert Johnson.
Yeah.
Jay Johnson, who I forget exactly his title, but he was over some high position in the Obama administration. Lewis Sullivan, Howard Thurman, Edwin Moses.
Yes, the great 440-meter sprinter. I knew that too. We knew Edwin Moses as we were growing up. He was one of our idols.
He was the guy. He sure was one of them.
I mean, how many races did he run without a defeat?
It was like literally, I think it was over a decade before he lost. Yeah, and he was a physicist. He was a physicist at Morehouse with like a 3.97. Yep, he's pretty impressive. He stayed in Atlanta and done a lot of things here as well. Cedric Richmond is another one. The Morehouse motto is to develop men of disciplined minds who lead lives of discipline and service. Ooh. Now, you can't understand Morehouse without understanding the AUC, as we call it here in Atlanta, acronym for the Atlanta University Center. It is a consortium and it is the largest educational complex for Black students in the United States. Over 10,000 students all attend Morehouse, Clark, Spelman, and Morehouse School of Medicine. 2 strict undergrad schools. Morehouse is all undergrad, Spelman all undergrad. By the way, Spelman every year has the highest graduation rate of any HBCU. And I went back and forth. Do I feature Spelman or Morehouse? Which one do I do first? And the only reason I ended up on the house was because we've featured some other women's colleges in the past. You know, I've done profiles on Smith. I'm going to have Barnard on for an interview. So at some point I'll come back and do Spelman, which is equally as impressive. And then, so you have 2 undergraduate schools, Spelman and Morehouse. And then you have 2 graduate schools, Clark. I mean, Clark is a full, BA to PhD. It's one of the main universities in the country way back in the day where blacks could get PhDs. Clark, Atlanta, and Howard would be the two most well-known nationally if you go back like 100 years ago. And then, of course, Morehouse School of Medicine, folks on the graduate level. And what this consortium did is it patterned itself after the Claremont colleges, Dave, which you've been to and you've loved.
Yep.
Talked about that in here before. So they studied the Claremont colleges, and they founded it in 1929. And it allows students to cross-register and take a wide range of courses and majors at all the campuses, even if your school does not offer a particular major or teacher, professor, or club. Each school is fiercely independent, though, maintaining its own board of trustees, its own administration, own dorms, own facilities, although there are some shared facilities like an incredible new library that all of the schools in the AUC do share. The AUC produces a steady stream of extremely talented graduates who go into the workforce in Atlanta. Atlanta is considered the heart of the civil rights movement, but it's also known as the Black Mecca, the place with the most talented Black workforce in the country. And that's largely because of these 10,000 students that the AUC graduates who stay on in Atlanta. Plus, you do have Emory, Georgia State, Georgia Tech, and some other schools in the city. But the AUC, more than anything, produces incredible, talented people who choose to stay in the city. It's located 3 miles from downtown in a part of Atlanta known as the West End. Unlike my women's college analogy, you do not have to be Black to go to an HBCU. In fact, some HBCUs are close to 50-50 Black versus all other races at this point, although Morehouse and Spelman are over 90% Black. Morehouse produced 4 Rhodes Scholars, over 2,100 students every year, 2,200. 100% undergraduate. It is a tight campus, 61-acre campus. As I said, it was on a civil rights battlefield, lots of magnolias. And you know what? Let me just take a break, Dave, and stop. I'm a little bit past the halfway point. Any thoughts, reflections? What are you thinking so far?
Well, it's a great history lesson. I have to admit that I did not know the history of the HBCUs. Oh my goodness!
I'm not editing it out again, Dave.
Oh man!
Let the listeners hear you.
Okay, I need to get the edit range for about 10 minutes. That's bad. But there you go. I must say though, I did know when I went to graduate school, I knew quite a few men from Morehouse, and they were always well represented in the graduate programs of select universities. And there was a certain pride and confidence that people from Morehouse and Howard and other HBCUs had that other universities did not. And I think that's just because of its history and its legacy. It was interesting how you talked about the changing of the names, but how it was named after finally a gentleman from the religious point of view. I did not know that. So that's neat.
Cool.
So,
good stuff.
Yeah. Now I can tell you that it's in the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium is right there. Because I remember I went through that part of Atlanta, and it's really going through a real revival. And Atlanta has now passed Chicago as the intellectual center for African Americans. It's quite some time ago. So it really does attract African Americans from all over the nation.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't realize that if you take the AUC away, and it would not have its same stature. Yeah. It's just 10,000 talented kids that oftentimes stay, young adults that oftentimes stay, in the area. Yeah. Another thing that Morehouse is known for is something called the Crown Forum. This Crown Forum brings together some of the most impressive people in the world to campus. In fact, after I left campus last time, I told you the last 2 years I've done counselor programs there, Shaquille O'Neal had just left. It just left. So they bring together incredible talent to the campus, and students are required to attend at least 6 Crown Forum events every semester. So you got to do a minimum of 12 a year. And these Crown Forum events, they expose students to issues affecting common humanity. They provide an encouragement to develop spirituality. They expose students to leading thinkers on topical issues. They also bring top artistic performances to campus, and they celebrate special events such as opening convocation Founders Day. They also recognize and celebrate achievements of members outside of the larger Morehouse community. They expose students to leading role models and they develop students' capacity to listen. And so some are in smaller settings, some are in larger settings, but they bring kind of the who's who, not only in the Black community, but in the world. Because the thing about a place like, Dave, you can relate to this. You were at leading institutions like Princeton and Harvard. People want to go to the leading institutions.
Yes, they do.
And so when you're talking about the leading institutions for the HBCUs in the country, there are really about 8 schools that could be considered first choice schools. But on anybody's short list, it's going to be Morehouse, Spelman, and Howard. They just are. And so they're always going to attract the top people that want to go there, whether it's Obama, or it's Oprah. I mean, those are the kind of people that come through the house.
Yep.
And then with the AUC, they can do a big joint event and they can have Clark and Spelman and everybody can join. Now, a few more things. They're Division II as far as athletics, 33 majors, 7 academic divisions. And those academic divisions would be business and economics, humanities, math and computational studies, creative and performing arts, social sciences and cultural studies, life sciences, and experiential learning and interdisciplinary learning. The strongest major by far is business. The business program is amazing. Not this last year, but the year before when I went to their counselor event, I got to have lunch with the head of their business department. And I was extremely impressed with both their business department and their career center, both of them. They intertwined the two, and they've been intertwined now for about 35 years. And they just work like a hand in glove. And so that career center is hooking all these business students up with very impressive internships right from their freshman summer. So, a lot of schools, people start thinking about internships like junior year. No, these students are doing their internships summer of their freshman year and many times even throughout the school year. And a who's who of everybody you can imagine comes to the house to recruit. They also have an incredible entrepreneurship program. I got to meet with the head of their Innovation Center. They actually provide seed money for people that want to start their own businesses. And I have 2 students going to Morehouse this year, actually, of my caseload, which, by the way, I was looking at my caseload, and if I combine my KIPP students and my School Match for You students, Dave, it was exactly 100 this year. Exactly 100.
Oh, cool.
100, right on the number. Yeah, so 2 of them are going to Morehouse. So they have an incredible innovation lab where they provide seed money for future entrepreneurs. And one of the students I have going there from DC, that's what made him pick the house over some other really attractive options. Some other very strong majors would be physics, which is what Edwin Moses studied, chemistry, science, computer science, and definitely engineering. Now you're saying, wait a minute, liberal arts and science schools usually don't have engineering. I mean, there's some that do. We featured one a few weeks ago, Union. But what they have is an incredible partnership with Georgia Tech, a 3-2 program with Georgia Tech. And it's one reason why Georgia Tech produces the second most Black engineers in the country, second only to Anika School and NCAT.
Right.
North Carolina A&T produces the most, and then Georgia Tech. But they have an amazing partnership with Georgia Tech. It involves a lot more things than just the engineering program, but allows students to get world-class engineering. And Spelman has the same program. So I know a lot of people that have done 3 years at Spelman, Georgia Tech, get the dual degree.
I'm sorry, elucidate on that. How does that work? So you do 3 years at Morehouse, 2 years at Spelman, then you get dual degrees from both. You end up, 3 years at Morehouse, 2 years at Georgia Tech, you mean?
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
And what degrees do you get exactly? You get
you're going to get you're going to get an engineering degree from Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
And then normally it will be physics, although it could be, chemistry.
Cool.
I mean, usually, so that's a pretty common combo here. And it's a great close partnership that they have.
Cool.
Political science is strong. Sociology is strong. Economics is very strong. All of your leading sort of top companies come to recruit Morehouse kids for consulting at, your Schwab's and all these companies. They all come through to recruit Morehouse kids. Now, I will tell students this, because I was meeting with the head of the business department, had lunch with them, and they have GPA cutoffs. So when they come through some of these top companies, they're like, look, you got to have a 3.5, got to have a 3.7, got to have a 3.3. And so that's just a reminder that your GPA can matter in terms of opportunities that you get after that.
Okay.
Film is growing. A lot of people don't know this, but film in Atlanta surpassed Los Angeles. So it's a multi-billion dollar business, and I can hardly go anywhere without the roads being closed for a film where I live. And all the Georgia schools really have bolstered their film programs because film's just booming as the state has these incredible tax incentives to attract top talent here. So taken over as a movie capital of the country. Some things about admissions. It's a Common App school. It requires a counselor recommendation, 2 teacher recommendations, one essay that's actually very important, plus your personal statement. And this is really cool, Dave. They have an online interview. Okay. Oh. And guess who they use for their online interview? I'll give you a hint.
Zoom video.
Well, you got the Z right. Oh. They use Zeemee.
Oh, Zeemee. All right.
Yeah. So we have our final part of our Zeemee interview, right? Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
Actually, we've already had it. You just listened to it. And that's who they use. So they have 4 questions that you have to answer through Zeemee. You're allowed a maximum of 7 minutes. You can't go over 7 minutes. And these are the questions. What person in your high school do you admire the most for their character?
Right.
How would you measure your character up against them? That's a deep question.
That is deep.
Oh, yeah. You got to speak into the camera, record it, and then it's like a video interview.
Yeah.
What are your academic and personal development goals for your undergraduate education? Share a time when you faced a particular difficult personal challenge. Describe how you handled it. Share a time when you had a leadership role. Explain what you learned about yourself and others in this experience. And then what else of importance should Morehouse know about you? That's a lot to cover in 7 minutes.
That is, but it's really smart because I remember some episodes back, you and Anika were having a discussion about parents working on their kids' personal statement and how you could distinguish whether it was an authentic voice or not. So it's hard to fake a video.
Well, not only that, but you learn things about somebody through through how they communicate in a different kind of way. So I commend Morehouse and I commend Zeemee for making that partnership work. Both of them. Test scores are also required, ACT or SAT. They have 3 ways of applying: early action and early decision, both due November 1st, and regular decision due February 1st. Now, they're going to be very clear. If you need scholarship money, you need to be getting in early action or early decision because the money dries up and runs out.
Right.
Morehouse is like quite a few schools we featured on here. They attract the strongest of the strongest. For a lot of people, they're a first choice option and they'll turn down any school in the country to go there. But they also accept a wide range of kids. 74% acceptance rate, pretty broad range of test scores. It's challenging being an all-male school. Even in Morehouse, there are only 3 all-male schools left in the country. Wabash in Indiana, Hampton-Sydney in Virginia, and Morehouse.
Wow.
So it's tough to convince. Of course, it helps that Spelman's right there and Clark is right there. So that's the big selling features, but it's tough. Cost of attendance, $49,000. Scholarships tend to be based on a grid, SAT and GPA. And they start with 3.5 and 26 ACT or 1190 SAT. And those would be the smaller ones. And then they go up, to become larger as your stats are higher. 94% Black, 60% Pell Grant. So they're attracting a range of students from an income perspective. Yeah. And the biggest challenge that Morehouse has by far is the inability to meet the financial needs of students. So the loan debt can be very, very high there, which is why just within the last 2 weeks, Reed Hastings, CEO of Netflix, said he's giving Spelman $40 million, Morehouse $40 million, and United Negro College Fund $40 million. And Robert Smith made a commitment to give $500 million to 11, raise $500 million to 11 HBCUs. And Morehouse and Spelman and A&T and Howard and schools like that will definitely be in there. Mm-hmm. So some other things about Morehouse, they have some outstanding exchange programs. They have one for a group of 16 schools in the Associated Colleges of the South. And they have some others with leading colleges in the West, East, Midwest, all over the country, including Claremont McKenna in California, Dartmouth in New Hampshire, Davidson in North Carolina, NYU in New York, Pitzer in California, St. John's University in New York, Stanford in California, University of California at San Diego, obviously in California, and Vassar in New York. So students can go for either one semester or for a full year if you want to get the HBCU experience, but you also want to get the PWI, predominantly white experience, you can do that. And they also are part of course, I've mentioned they're part of the AUC. You can cross-register with all those courses at Clark and Spelman, but they're also part of a group called ARCHI, which stands for the Atlanta Regional Council of Higher Education. There are 19 colleges there, and it's basically all the colleges in New York. So you can take courses at an Emory or at Georgia State or at Agnes Scott, or in Oglethorpe or Georgia Tech. 19 schools throughout Atlanta. You can cross-register and take courses there as well. So any final thoughts on Morehouse, Dave? That's the house.
No, very impressive. The bedrock of the African-American middle class has been the historically Black colleges. Because, Mark, do you have the statistics on what percentage of the PhDs and the doctors actually have been trained by the HBCUs?
It's high percentage. A lot of it is, to think about it, it really wasn't until the civil rights movement that you started to see widespread integration at PWIs. Right. You started to see significant recruitment for a more diverse student body. Sure, there wasn't legal segregation for a while, but you might have had 1 or 2%, if that, at certain schools. So it was really after the civil rights movement when most of the most well-known predominantly white institutions said, look what's going on. We're not talking to each other. We're living completely separately. This is not right. We've got to start living with each other and learning from each other. So, and particularly in the South, anybody who's, put it this way, it's not that common to find people over 50 in the South that didn't go to an HBCU.
Right.
The majority of them did, and certainly over 60.
Right.
They just did. They went to FAMU, which is a really popular one, Tallahassee. Of course, they went to Tuskegee, extremely popular one, in Alabama. Yes. Obviously, NCAT, mentioned that. Howard, we've talked about Howard, and then Spelman, Morehouse, and Hampton. Those are all ones that would often be first choice options. And then there's other ones too that have niches where they're really, really good in a particular area. So, and that's one of the biggest differences for me doing college counseling in the North versus in the South. When I was in the North, if it was an African-American student, they normally wouldn't look at PWIs. So, at HBCUs, although there were always some that wanted to have the experience of, I'm tired of being a minority. Right. And just for 4 years in my life, I'd like to not be a minority. That would be empowering.
Right.
But in the South, it's very, very, very common because the parents went there and they had great experiences, and they have a certain kind of culture with homecoming, and kids grew up going to homecomings. And so, just one of the differences between the South and the North. So anyway, I've tried to strike the balance with having HBCUs here. I want to include some because they're very important. Our study of our audience has showed that 18% of our listeners are Black. I don't want to talk about them too much because I know most people probably won't consider them. We also have a lot of college counselors that listen, and it's good for them. And so I like to at least feature 1 or 2 a year.
Well, Morehouse is an outstanding school. It's produced outstanding graduates, and they have been the backbone of the middle class of a very important group in this country. So I think we should continue to consider them.
Yeah, and it's, one thing, it's a personal decision whether you go. I seriously gave consideration to Howard. Seriously did. And then at the end I said, you know what? The whole world's not Black. I want to go somewhere where I see a little bit of everybody. But it wouldn't have been a wrong decision. It's just a very personal decision whether you choose to go to a place, where you have that empowering experience for 4 years, or whether you choose to go somewhere that doesn't have that. And one of the things I don't like is a lot of times in the Black community, there's this huge debate, it's wrong to not go to HBCU, or everybody should, or everybody shouldn't. And it's just not like that, right? It's anyway, let's talk this one out. Personal choice. That's why America's great. We've got 2,300 4-year accredited schools out there. Yeah. And you can have Baskin Robbins. You can get almost any flavor you want.
That's right.
And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. Your College Bound Kid is produced by Dave Vasaya of podcastengineers.com. If you find this podcast helpful, it would help us tremendously if you would subscribe and write us a review on your favorite podcast listening station. And please be sure to click the share button and send this to someone you know that can really use this information. The amazing music that you hear is by Victor Allen Weeks. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Webmaster is Stallianos Dimitru. And marketing designs are by Kimberly Blass. And if you want to get a copy of the book, 171 Answers to the Most Asked College Admissions Questions, you can go right to 171answers.com. And if you want to have a college coaching session with Mark, you can send him a text to area code 404-664-4340. And if you have a question or a few questions that you would like to ask us, and we'll include them on the show, you can just email us at questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Every week, we'll take one question and include it in the episode. We don't like your questions. We love your questions. So send them our way. And by the way, check out our website, yourcollegeboundkid.com. Again, we thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week.